Welcome to the Invernadero Mind Podcast. I am your host, Gabriela, and I'm so happy that you're here. Invernadero is Spanish for greenhouse. It represents light, life, and a home for bright minds. In this podcast, I discuss hot present topics in today's culture, and our guests share their successes, challenges, and their journey in finding balance between chasing their dreams while protecting their mind and spirit in this fast-paced culture. In this inclusive podcast, we talk to everyone. Stay tuned and let's get the conversation started. Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever the time for you is right now. I am so happy about this week's episode. Today's guest is someone super talented, someone smart and full of such good energy. Her name is Nistha and she is a mindset coach and also a writer. Her most recent work is her poetry book, which I'm pretty excited about and I'm excited to get my hands on. I love reading poetry and I have a good feeling about this one. While talking to Nistha, I learned a few things that I myself started implementing in my personal life. She discusses the power of changing our mindset and the power of small steps. We also talk about manifestation and why sometimes not getting what we want might be a blessing in disguise. This entire conversation is full of good energy and fantastic lessons. Nistha spills the tea on how to get what you want in life. She is such a sweetheart. Let's welcome Nistha Dube. Hello, Nistha. How are you? Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview.
Hi, Gabby. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Good. I'm so happy. When I found you on Instagram, I was super excited because I immediately, resonated with a lot of the content that you share. And I was like, oh my God, this is, the exact same things that I believe in and I kind of follow and try to learn, So definitely I became very, very drawn to your work. So tell us your story. First of all, let's start from the beginning. What did you go to school for?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm really glad that you resonated with, what I talk about because it's something that I really care about. But I guess starting with my story and, backtracking 4 years with what I went to school for, I did go to Virginia Tech and I studied psychology and neuroscience there. So I went in originally, being really into behavioral sciences, always reading books about like the brain and human behavior, but not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do with psychology or neuroscience. So I picked up the two majors. I studied them. Psych was from my freshman year to senior year, and I picked up neuroscience as a primary major my sophomore year. So I really enjoyed both those fields of study. Again, kind of navigated through college unsure of what exactly I would do with them. But in the moment, I kind of knew that that's what I really cared about. So I stuck with that and honestly truly enjoyed my classes and schoolwork. So it was a good time. College was definitely a lot of learning, I would say, more personally than professionally. But I think I really can't say that I regret anything just because it's, I think, sounds cliche, but definitely shaped me into who I am in terms of inner healing and understanding myself and kind of, building relationships with other people. So
when you're learning psychology and neuroscience, I can only assume that you're also learning in a way to kind of decipher why a person behaves the way they do. And, kind of like the psychology behind or the reasons behind actions, right? So in a way, I feel like it's helping you with what you're doing now. So, these are very interesting majors, but like, what kinds of careers can you have out of this? Like, because I feel like you could go into different fields, like different paths.
Yeah. So I remember going into college, I was telling like my family that I was going to study psych. And I think they had this really like traditional orthodox, like old school view of me, like as a therapist sitting in like or enclosed room with like a chair and a client.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's so much more. And that's not necessarily what I want to do. I never kind of saw myself being a traditional therapist in that sense. I'm someone who's always gravitated more towards like communications and having like a very free flowing, free spirited type of dynamic with the work that I do. So I kind of always saw myself a little bit more in like, I guess, the public sector, if you will, and communications roles. And traditionally with psych majors and neuroscience majors, a lot of them do gravitate towards some sort of pre-health track. So whether it's pre-med, pre-dentistry, a lot of them are in the nursing line, or they pick up like nutrition on the side or whatever it is. But I think for me, it was like I never really resonated with any of those fields. And if you don't resonate with the pre-health field, you generally go into either research or you go into academia, neither of which I really saw myself in. So I was kind of in this rut where I was like, I really don't know what I want to, like what feasibly or logically I could do with this career. Then it came to my junior year, and I had a lot of friends who weren't psych or neuro majors. They were more in like the business field, and they were all applying to consulting jobs. And I remember one of my friends asked me if I had ever considered consulting or heard of consulting. And I was like, oh no, like, what's that? He broke it down for me, and he was like, yeah, I mean, you pretty much like work to solve business problems, and you, kind of create that framework for them. And it's a lot of communications heavy work and problem solving and critical thinking, and you'd be really good for it. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, so they take people from different majors, I'm assuming. And he was like, yeah, like they take people from psych and history and English. And I was like, oh, perfect. Like I found something that I finally fit into. Cause I think that was the question throughout all of college. It was like, what do I fit into the most? What makes sense the most? I think that's the conditioning that traditionally most students go down upon, right? Like you pick college, or then you pick a major, and then you pick a job that aligns with that. And I think that was the first time where I was like, oh, this is something I could see myself in. And it wasn't so much of the question of like, would this fulfill me? Would I be truly happy? Would I be able to offer the most impact? Because at this point I was probably 19, and I was like, oh, cool, makes sense. Consulting it. So kind of steered in that direction for a while with, doing a corporate internship at a tech company and applying to consulting positions, and being in that world for like about a year and a half in just terms of like the applications and the networking and the internship and follow-up interviews. And it was only really study abroad where I made a pivot. So I'm sure we can touch more on that in the questions moving forward.
So you said you were doing internships. At what point did you realize, okay, I'm done with doing internships and I'm actually going to start, coaching? Or did you actually start working and then you figure out you would coach?
Yeah, so pretty much what happened is the way that we do it here in our school systems is we do traditionally, like you have your big internship the year before your senior year of college. So it's the summer between your junior and senior year. So that's the summer that I was like, oh, I really need an internship to put on my resume, because traditionally that's the way it works, because employers look at what you did that particular summer in order to hire full time. So that was a summer that I was applying desperately to a ton of like tech and business roles, even though that's so not my background. It's obviously not what I'm passionate about, but it was what made sense. So that's what I did. And I ended up interning, the whole summer at a local tech company. And then literally right after that internship, I studied abroad, which was a very spontaneous decision of mine. I actually literally applied before the deadline, then went to my dream country, which is Spain. So I was there for 3 months living with a host mom and my best friend from college. And like I had studied Spanish. Yeah, it was so fun. And I had studied Spanish since like the 8th grade. So for me, this was the coolest experience ever, because I had always dreamed of going to Spain and like did not think I would go my senior year of college ever. Like that was the most random thing.
Yeah.
It was really like, don't want to sound like one of those basic study abroad girls, but like I am, so I'm going to own it. But like literally the best experience ever. Like still always think about like the cafe con leche. Like nothing has topped the cafe con leche in Spain, in the States. So, like jokes aside, I was there and I found so much like appreciation for the culture, because people were just so like welcoming and open and free flowing, and not everything necessarily was work. It was a lot of like lifestyle and culture and music and food. And I was like, wow, like people actually sit outside and enjoy their time. And there's not like a deadline to go back to work and start working again. They also, like, so many of them have smiles on their faces and they're so welcoming to speak to tourists. And I've just felt so much more welcome there than I like honestly ever had in the States. And I've grown up here and spent my whole life here. So I was like, this is interesting, and kind of, being in that environment where I felt like almost like home, if you will. I was like, this is where I want to like return, and this is the type of lifestyle I want to live. So I think it was there where I was like, you know what, I don't really want to go back to States and follow up with the full-time role that, I could have with the company, or, other corporate business roles either. So I made that mental decision to myself where whatever I would do in the future, I didn't know what it would be, but it would allow me to have financial freedom, and it would allow me to live a lifestyle where I'm happy, and it would allow me to hopefully be in Spain one day. So I came back here, and I came back to the States. I had one semester left of college. So I'm back to tech, and I was back on campus, and it was recruiting season for full-time jobs. And I promised myself, I told myself, like, Nistha, you will not get sucked back into the rat race. You're not going to get influenced by anyone around you and what they're doing, because the people that I went to school with were very much in the whole, like, we're aiming for Microsoft and Google and Facebook and those typical things. And, I went back and unfortunately, like, was sucked right back in those conversations. And I felt like where I was coming from was very naive. And I felt like I was being very illogical for wanting what I did. So I unfortunately started going to career fairs again and putting myself and streamlining myself back into those boxes that I was once just a summer earlier. And then, ultimately got some job offers. The pandemic hit, school became online and virtual. So I was at home with my parents. And then I was kind of just thinking about taking the full-time offer with another local company I had gotten an offer from. And I was like, do I really want this? And it was honestly a phone call with my friend where I was just telling her about this, versus like my experience in Spain and how I so desperately wanted to go back. And she was like, Nistha, you just sound so unhappy, like, talking about the job. And I think it was those words. I just needed someone to say that to me, because it confirms my gut feeling and my intuition. And I was like, you're right. I have my entire life have always like been very much more communications oriented. And if, I remember as a little child dreaming of like writing books and speaking on stages. And I was like, if that's what I want to do truly, like, when else, aside from a global pandemic that forces me to stay in my house for like a year, when else is a better time? So it was kind of that moment where I was like, sort of, okay, this is a now or never type of thing, not to be so drastic, but that's how it was in my mind. I was like, I either do this or I don't. And that's kind of where it steered into me building the brand and doing the coaching, and really kind of understanding, like, I really care about mindset and motivation, and care about seeing people pursue their purpose. So I want to make content around that. And so, the first thought in my head wasn't, oh, I'm just going to become a coach. The first thought in my head was like, let me just start making videos, and let me just put it on YouTube and put it on TikTok and make a podcast and just see who resonates with it. And that was scary enough for me. Like, that was terrifying to get out of my comfort zone and be like, hey world, like, here's like law of attraction. Like, like, that's, people don't just, like, people aren't ready to hear that unless they're at that stage where they're like, okay, let me like be more open-minded. And I can't blame them. I wasn't into any of this a couple of years ago. So for me to have taken that step was a huge deal. And then after that, I started noticing like people reaching out and people commenting on my videos or asking me questions. And I was like, okay, cool. People need this. Like, some people need to hear this. Let me start having one-on-one conversations. And then I discovered that mindset coaching was a specific like subcategory of life coaching that actually exists, and people do it. And I was like, cool, let me just start this and see what happens. And ever since I kind of made that decision, like, it's been great. The clientele has been growing, and I feel like I've been making more videos that, when I allude to coaching or I talk about my clients' results, get a lot more traction and get me a lot more clients. So it's just been something that for me has been way more fulfilling than what I could have been doing otherwise had I not chosen this path.
I totally get what you say. But now, like, being your own boss sounds great and also scary at the same time. What was the most challenging thing you had to do to get started?
Oh my gosh. Because I look back and I'm like, there are so many things. Like, it was just a lot. I would say the hardest thing is just, it's all internal. It's all in your head. It's all mindset. For me, it was a lot of unlearning limiting beliefs that I had around the idea that I could just graduate college and just start my own brand and be my own boss without going down the typical route of having a job first. That to me was foreign. I didn't think that was possible. I didn't think people did that. So for me, a huge, turning point for that was like looking at people on TikTok, like Haley Hoffman Smith, or looking at people like Manifestation Babe, or hearing crazy stories like Jay Shetty's story where he went and became a monk for 3 years after college. Came back and was like, just kidding, I'm gonna like make videos. So it's like,
just kidding.
And it's like, it helps you unlearn your own limiting beliefs, because like, it doesn't have to be so cutthroat. It doesn't have to be so streamlined. You don't have to follow all the traditional conventional steps that people tell you are right or expected. And honestly, it was seeing those people that made me realize like, I can do my own thing. The only thing that's creating a divide between them and me right now is the fact that I don't believe it yet. Like, these people believe in themselves enough to go out there, and Haley wrote the book in college and now is a motivational speaker and like doesn't work a traditional job, but is just like right out of college. She's been out of college for a couple of years, but didn't stay in the traditional workforce for too long. And same with Catherine, who's Manifestation Babe. I think she very briefly worked a job and then was like, I want to start a brand around manifestation. And now turned 27 and recently hit her like, I think 4 million in revenue in just a couple of years of her business. So I looked at these people and I'm like, the only thing that's making me feel like I can't do that is the belief in me that I can't. And so I would say the hardest part for that, or the hardest part of that, is just unlearning it and understanding that like everything that you believe in this world is most likely a result of some sort of conditioning, whether it's trauma or a conversation with a friend or expectations at school or a teacher or a coach like throws on you. Those are all, if you choose to carry on those beliefs, and that's what will be reflected in your external reality. So I think for me, it was like, if I really want to write books and I want to be a speaker and I want to be a coach, then I need to get into the mind frame where I'm doing that and it's sustainable for myself. And that comes with a lot of like shedding of friendships and relationships.
Yeah, definitely.
And people in your life who just don't understand what's happening or don't understand like what your path is, because all of a sudden it changed, and like aren't necessarily the most supportive. And these are people who you might have been friends with for like years. So I think that's very emotionally difficult as well.
Now, while you're working on all of this, right, and you're realizing you want to go ahead and get started with coaching and all of this, how was your family's, what did they say? Like, what was their response to this? Or did you just like started working on it and then told them later?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So basically, my mom both my parents have always been incredibly supportive from the get-go about like career and what I wanted to do. Back when I was even starting college and I picked up psych and neuro, they were like, oh, but you love communications. Like, why don't you study journalism? Like, that's like my parents, It's not like, I'm fortunate that they're not the typical like, okay, you have to study like CS or engineering or whatever. Like, they were never like that. But surely when I graduated college and I had a job offer from a local company that's like 15 minutes away from my house and they're paying well and it makes sense. And for me to have been like, just kidding, I'm going to kind of start my own brand around manifestation and mindset. They were definitely like, where did this come from? They were a little bit confused. And then my mom she always told me, she was like, you know what, you're young. I don't want you to have regrets. So if this is what you want to do, like, do it. And my dad was kind of more of like, did you want to start with the job and then pivot, like a little bit more safe?
Yeah.
Like, that. And I truly thought that that was like a valid point. I was like, why don't I start with the job and then do this on the side? And that was something I debated with for myself for like months. I was like, maybe I should just take it, or should take some job and have this on the side. Because at that point I didn't believe in myself enough to have this be a full-time thing. There was definitely doubt in me around being able to be successful with my own brand. And then eventually I was like, you know what, I'm just going to have to prove to myself and prove to the people around me that this is something that is sustainable. Only then will they stop pressing me with those comments. Because I would go and take walks and like my neighbors would be like, oh, so how's the job hunt going? And I'm like, not doing it, because I started this. And they were all like, oh, what? So I made a mental note to myself that in order for people to take me seriously, I need to have results with this. Like, I need to, have the transformations for my clients, I need to have like a stable like source of income coming in to prove to my parents like I am, sustaining myself and I can be financially independent. So, it took a lot of like consistency with making the content and putting it out there and doing a lot of business strategy training with online workshops and modules and going to seminars and doing mastermind workshops and networking. Like it was a whole ton of spending days and hours consecutively on end and like having to make priorities with how often I see other people in my life, to ultimately get to a place where I felt comfortable charging for my work. Because right off the bat, right, as I said, I wasn't like, cool, I'm a mindset coach, now pay me. It was one of those things where I eased into it. And when I first coached people, it was completely free just to build testimonials and to see how it worked out. And then I started with a very low rate on coaching. And then gradually over time, I worked my way up to, a higher rate. But now I'm at a place where my parents have seen that transformation. They've seen me work so hard and, they're, seeing different offers come in and opportunities in my life. So I think for them, it's like now become a thing where they truly believe and they see that this is my purpose. And more importantly, I see that now. Like there's no part of me in my mind that's entertaining like, oh, what if I had a stable job on the side? Because that's still setting up the vibration that I don't believe in myself. But I'm at the point now where like, this is it, we're just moving forward from here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you have the determination that pretty much, could hell, you could be anything and do anything. And I like that. Now, do you ever experience imposter syndrome?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's interesting because like when you have your own sort of like brand or you are your own boss, I would say the sense of competition, if you will, sort of decreases pretty drastically because the metrics that you, I guess, would hold for yourself as to what success is or what that looks like become very different. It's not the same, when you're in school and all the metrics are the same. You have GPA, you have letter grades, you have like accolades and awards for being in a certain society. Like none of that happens when you just are a coach and you have clients. Of course, there are certain metrics like, how much money you earn per month. Like that's a huge term when people talk about 5-figure months or 6-figure months. And that's a thing. And I just started, so I'm not even like holding myself to that standard right now. I'm easing into all of that. But, I making content online, you see people who have like followers and likes and sponsorships. And at the end of the day, I think it just comes down to how much like those are priorities for you. And I see people with more followers than me that to me doesn't really, in any way create any sense of like dissonance or competition for me. If anything, I'm just like, I know that my community, my followers, like those things will grow as I start to expand my energy, as I start to become more confident, believe in myself and stay consistent with my work. Of course, there are people who become like overnight successes. Like you see that happen on TikTok, but in the self-development community as a coach, like that's not normal. That doesn't happen, nor would I want that for myself, because I think when you're trying to get into this field and you're trying to spread out informational content, it's so much about steady consistency and working on yourself mentally and understanding how to respond to the comments if there are negative comments or there are haters. It's a lot of like internal work. So I think for me, like, fortunately now I haven't faced too much of it. I think if anything, more of the imposter syndrome I face is when I'm in groups of people who are in different fields than me, who are maybe working traditional jobs at really good companies and hearing them talk about how they're like at X company and they're making this much and they're going to make a down payment on their home or things like that can definitely make me feel like, oh man, should I have done that? It always like raises a thought in my mind for my own self. It's like, oh my gosh, am I like totally on the wrong path? Even though I know I'm not, it's just my ego and my fear-based thinking that's interfering. So I would say I experience it more then with those people rather than people in my own niche, because I'm just so fortunate that the people in my own niche who I've come across so far have been like really supportive of me and what I do. And we always help each other more than like compete in any way. But I will say what helps me a lot in general with the whole imposter syndrome concept is I've mentioned Manifestation Babe earlier. Catherine Zenkina is her actual name, but she has this whole podcast and this whole like theory that we pretty much as humans make up the idea of competition. Like there doesn't have to be competition ever, because success isn't a zero-sum game. Like, truly everyone can be successful if they want, is her theory. And Naval Ravikant actually echoed this too. He said everyone wants to be wealthy. There is room for that. Like, money and wealth isn't a zero-sum game either. So I think hearing them talk about that, and then hearing Catherine also say, like, we all have our own like energetic blueprints, if you will. Like, we all come onto this planet with certain missions that are unique to us, and no one can take that place. That made me realize, like, I'm more than just like, I guess, a pawn that has like to produce output, right?
Yeah,
Like, when you see
exactly.
yourself that way, it's very easy to get into the metrics game and the numbers game. But I see myself as like an actual like soul that has a mission that is here for a certain like cause and a certain service. And when I see myself that way, it like totally, I guess, deconstructs this idea that there is competition, because I'm like, even though there's tens of thousands of mindset coaches, we all have our own perspectives, we all have our own life experiences, and we all have different people that will resonate with us better than others. And that's just coming down to our energy. So seeing it that way definitely has helped a lot for me.
I love it. I love that. And I think you are so right. I mean, sometimes, we're human. We're bound to not only make mistakes, but, compare each other, especially in a circle of friends where everybody's doing this and that. They're all like there, right? Under, the perspective and what society has said, put upon us. But if you actually surround yourself with people that are in your, like you said, in your niche, they'll actually lift you up. It's like amazing how that works, really. And that happened to me too. I mean, in different times in my life, where I had to actually, where I was working on a project and certain, groups of friends weren't there or didn't get it, I would actually surround myself with other people that were kind of doing what I was doing. And it's always like such a good feeling when people understand what you're going through and they actually lift you and say, hey, you can do it, or how can I help you, So that's super, super cool. Now, you shared your experience about being part of the Seth Godin's Kimbo Workshop. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
The Emerging Leaders Program. What did you learn from there? What was that like?
Oh, that was so fun. So that was pretty much like a 1 week conference, and literally it was like about, I want to say close to 100 students, and we were all like, I want to say ranging from the ages of like 18 to 27 is the range, or maybe even below 18, from all over the world. So there were people joining in from Australia. It was like midnight for them when it was 10 a.m. here for me. And it was the coolest thing. And basically we would have these 2-hour Zoom calls where we would just break into different breakout rooms with like maybe 4 or 5 people. And we would just answer questions about like how we view success and the education system and things we want to work on and how we see the world. And it was very like open-ended, deep, I would say, like philosophical questions about like life and career and meaning and perspective. And it was so cool because these are truly like the most like thought-provoking conversations I've ever had. And I've never, ever been in like a virtual room, if you will, of like so many people who are like totally different majors from me, like who are like engineering and pre-med and like, or like in already working in investment banking. And they're so like supportive and open to hearing new ideas and have podcasts and blogs and startups. And I'm like, this is incredible, because when I, in university, like would talk to certain people in like computer science or engineering, they would never like be open to those things, or they would be very closed-minded to certain things that I would talk about. And there's a reason that I waited till literally the pandemic, when I was in the safety of like my home with my parents, to start a podcast or to talk about certain topics, because I was like, I could never speak about this in school without being called crazy. But in this like, Akimbo virtual conference, like everyone was so supportive of everyone else. It was truly that idea of like, literally to your point about when you're, in your niche, or in this situation, it wasn't even my niche. It was people from all over with different perspectives, with different backgrounds. We were still lifting each other up. And I've just never been around such like positive vibes or such support. So for me, it was a really like groundbreaking experience, I would say. And just the fact that like, I looked forward to getting on these Zoom calls and just talking for 2 hours a day. And then pretty much what we had after the 2-hour phone call was like a assignment for that given day, where we would break up into teams and we would have to pretty much complete some sort of project that would be due at that day by midnight. So those projects look like TED Talks or creating like a business model startup or whatever. So those are really fun because like then we actually got to like work in teams with people that we might not have been in a breakout room with in the actual call itself. So pretty much got to meet almost everyone in that program. And then we all still stay in touch today. So like everyone follows everyone on social media. We're all commenting on each other's pictures, hyping each other up. Like people are now working on individual like projects and startups and collabs and blogs together, like from different parts of the world. So
that's super
it
cool.
was a really beautiful experience and I recommend it to everyone. I even posted about it on Instagram a few weeks ago. So if anyone's listening to this and is interested, feel free to look up Akimbo, Seth Godin's workshops, or you can even reach out to me and I can get you connected.
Yeah,
so.
awesome. Did you guys get to talk to Seth Godin, or it was more like,
So
their representatives?
literally he came on the last day. We had like a closing ceremony and I'm so dumb. I literally just got the time wrong. I don't know why I got the time wrong. I was literally on the call every single day. And for some reason, I thought the closing ceremony was at 5:30 on the last day and it was at 4:30. So I logged into the Zoom call and it was totally over. And I texted my friends. I'm like, oh, am I like early? And they're like, it just ended. So Seth Godin actually came.
Oh my God.
He just talked for like 10 minutes. So it wasn't a huge thing.
Yeah.
But I was still so upset with myself. I was like, how did I miss the closing ceremony? Like, how did I get the time wrong? So,
it
but it's
happens.
fine. He's always going live with like Akimbo, like the Kimbo leaders and ambassadors on like LinkedIn. So I'll go and tune in there and I'm still in touch with like the community. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, it happens. It happened to me one time. For some reason in my head, I hear, a time and either I write it wrong on my calendar or in my head, I'm thinking like, say it's 5:00 and I'm thinking 6 for a reason. And I actually believe it. Right. So when it's the day, I'm like, I thought it was 6 and I'm 100% sure that it was 6:00. And then the next day it's like 5,
Literally, yeah. I was like, of course. And I was so sad because it was his last day and I was like actually emotional after our last call, like that earlier that morning. I was like, I'm gonna miss these people. And then they also like took like a group picture and I was like, I couldn't be in this group photo. So that was fun.
But it's so good that you guys keep in touch. I mean, that's at least, you can gain friendships out of those kinds of events, or programs. Now, what do you do when you face a roadblock? We're going to talk about failure here in a little, but can you give us an example of a time you failed or you faced a big roadblock and how did you overcome this?
Yeah, so that's a really good question because so far I feel like the only roadblocks that I faced, fortunately, have just been like lack of motivation or lack of drive, or I think not having my priorities balanced well enough. So I'll get to a point where I stress myself out too much because I've either worked all day and I've not given myself time to like take a mental check-in with myself, or I have like been too in my head about like a personal situation that's allowed me to, it's kind of like I haven't set the boundaries well enough to where the point where that hasn't affected my professional life. So I will say, like, fortunately, there haven't been like solely professional roadblocks, but the roadblocks for me have been a lot about the balance between my personal and professional life. So I think in those cases, a lot of it, like I'm huge on just, like meditation and spending time with yourself. And I always talk about this idea of like listening to your inner voice and just like actually hearing yourself instead of all the noise that you're surrounded by on social media or when you're at work or when you're on calls or in meetings. So for me, it's crucial for me to take walks every day. It's crucial for me to like sit down and just breathe, even if I don't do a whole meditation that day, to just like have some moments where I'm disconnected from social media and check in with myself, do the whole like no technology thing in the mornings for an hour. If I can get myself to journal, I'll journal. But I think for me, like the best, most productive days for me have come from when I do the mental check-ins. And I think fortunately for me, because this has been the first year, there haven't been any crazy professional like obstacles just yet. I'm sure there will be plenty to come. But I think the biggest thing that has been challenging for me is just like creating the foundation, personally and professionally, so I can get to that place where eventually, there will be other things to worry about. So
I love that. Yes. And I'm sure as you grow, you encounter bigger challenges, right? So
totally.
I guess you'll have to deal with it as the time progresses. So, but I'm sure you'll do fine. I mean, it's one of those things that you really have to. You'll be fine.
Yeah. And I do think the philosophy like that I just kind of like mentioned here, checking in with yourself is honestly something that will be applicable to all of them. Like you always have to step back and breathe and understand that like whatever you're stressing about or whatever is coming in the way is something that you don't necessarily have to attach to so drastically. It's something that you can like observe or reframe your thoughts and be like, this isn't happening to me, but it's happening for me. And that's something that's helped me across my past as well, like with certain friendships that have fallen out or relationships that have fallen through, or anything else, like even in school when like there's a miscommunication or something has gone wrong for me. I always think about it this way, where it's like that happened for me, like that happened in my favor for a reason, even if in the moment I can't see it.
Now, one thing that while I was doing my research to interview you, I saw something that you shared on your stories that was super, super interesting. So in general, people tend to phrase, due to the fear of failing and not doing things right, the first time. Some won't even take the first steps. And you talked about the butterfly effect, which is something that caught my attention right away. How did one small, or as you called it, in that post, insignificant decision turn things around for you? Like, how did your decisions compute, or catapult your current success?
Yeah, that's huge. And I think people often undermine the value of just that one small step. It's like the 1% rule where like you do one little thing every day, like whether that's read one word of a book or learn one new word of a language or take like run for 1 minute of your day. And you keep doing that over 365 days, like, it kind of compounds, or over like 100 like intervals, it will compound to be like 100% of you having done that skill. So for me, that like initial insignificant thing, I guess at that point, looking back at it, vividly remember it was March 27th where I was like, I need to just start a YouTube channel and I'm just going to do this and see whatever happens. This was at a time where I was so not confident in the fact that I would like have this be my full-time thing. So I literally made a video, not even related to my brand or what I talk about. It was just about my study abroad experience in Spain. And I was like, this is going to be a video and this is going to be me speaking to a camera to see how it feels, to see if I'm comfortable with it. And most importantly, I'm just going to post it and see like what happens. Because just a little preface about me on social media, like my close friends know this, but throughout college, I was very, very closed off on social media. So I had like literally 90 Instagram followers. Like I didn't let people who weren't in my inner circle or who weren't family or roommates or like coworkers, I didn't let them follow me. So I literally had 93 followers. The beginning of this year was private on Instagram, like did not share anything publicly, never thought I would have like a public platform, if you will. And then to have jumped from, 2 months later to me making a YouTube video, like that was a big deal to put myself out there publicly. So that for me was just an experimental thing. And then I think it was like, I started doing those more routinely and I started switching into talking about spirituality, which was a little bit more out of my comfort zone. And then I was like, you know what, let's just do this on TikTok. Like people on TikTok have platforms. That to me at that point was also seemingly not a huge, big decision. Like I wasn't switching to TikTok being like, oh my God, I'm going to have clients from this and start making money and have a business. Like it was none of that. Like for me, it was just like, cool, more people will hear about like mindset reframing techniques. So I did it on TikTok. And then I remember like having this like, I was talking about it with a friend and she was like, why don't you just do a webinar and talk about it on LinkedIn? Because people need to hear about it on LinkedIn. And I was so intimidated by LinkedIn because I was like, people here are so professional. Like I can't just show up on LinkedIn. Here's my manifestation webinar, like come through. So it was
and
like
everybody looks so serious on LinkedIn. Everybody looks so professional, like they're already out there. Like I myself, if somebody would tell me that, I'd be like, no, hell no, not yet. Yeah.
My heart was racing when she told me to do that. And I literally told her, I was like, I cannot do that. Like even on LinkedIn, I think I had like under 100 like connections because I just like, that's how I was all over social media. Even though LinkedIn isn't as like social media-esque, I was still like that. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to get out of my comfort zone because I believe the best things happen from these like small steps that are a little scary. So I did a webinar called Connect with Your Purpose and Strengths. And I posted it on LinkedIn, and I hadn't posted on LinkedIn since I was interning at my internship the summer prior. Like I hadn't even gone into LinkedIn, and I was like, cool. And so I posted about it, and like I got a lot of people who were interested, and I built up an email like list type of thing. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to do this. And literally I did the webinar and like 4 people showed up, and I was like cheering that only 4 people came because I had such bad anxiety that I was like, this is excellent. Like, it's only 4 of you. And then here's where the butterfly effect comes into play. One of the 4 people actually just so happened to be a product manager at a mental health nonprofit that had come to Virginia Tech when I was either a freshman or a sophomore. So I had gone to their meeting. They're called the JCK Foundation. And she reached out to me and she was like, I actually make workshops and modules for JCK, and I really enjoyed yours. Would you like to come speak with us at schools about mental health? And I was like, this is literally what I've always wanted. Like, since high school, I actually have a whole nother story on that, but that's something that I promised myself I would do, is like go into schools, and more than just like doing the mindset coaching and talking to clients about this, I want to talk to students and kids about like mindset reframing and the idea of your purpose and what that is, and really make school more of an intentional place where you can cultivate your creativity and skills rather than just have this cutthroat, streamlined, like, sort of, I guess, path be transferred down to students. I didn't like that. So when she offered me this, I was like, this is so crazy. Like, this wouldn't have happened had I not put myself out there. And the only way that I got myself to put myself out there on LinkedIn was because I was putting myself out there on YouTube and TikTok. And actually the friend who told me to make the LinkedIn webinar had found me through my videos. So we met because she had come to one of my like Instagram lives that I did way back, like when I was first starting my brand. So she wasn't even someone that I had known prior to this. And I was like, I wouldn't have met this friend had I not done the Instagram live. And then if I hadn't met her, I wouldn't have done the LinkedIn thing. And then I wouldn't have had the opportunity to speak with JCK.
It's like a domino effect in a way.
It's literally that. And then it was just so weird because I've had like more things come up after that. Like, and I think you probably read it in the post, but it's like been a series of that continuously for me, where it's like, that's why the way I see it now is like when you can get out of your comfort zone just a little bit, and it terrifies you in the beginning, it'll always lead you to, I would say, like a place where you are able to provide more impact.
No, now, that you're working as a coach, what is one struggle you see most people, that seek your guidance experience when it comes to switching their mindset?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I have so many people, I would say more on the manifestation end, who see my videos about like manifesting and will come and will ask me questions like, oh, I see this certain method or this technique on social media, but it's not working for me. How can I do this? So I think a huge thing that I've noticed when I work with clients, or when I work with even people who are interested in the coaching who don't end up converting, is that so many people have a misconception of what manifesting is. And they think it's like this like spell you can cast where you can say a few words or you can do a ritual and it'll happen. And then when it doesn't happen, they're like, oh, this isn't real. And I think for me, what has been huge is to explain to them that like manifesting is so related to your mindset, because it is so much about inner healing and inner work. It is about your belief systems and the relationships that you have with the thing that you're trying to manifest. So I always give people examples. Like, so many people ask me like, oh my gosh, I want to manifest like this certain boy into my life. And I'm like, well, if you want to do that, like ask yourself, like, what is your relationship with love? Like, do you show love to yourself? Are you respecting your own boundaries with other people? Are you able to be independent enough single, where if you were to be in a relationship, you would be interdependent? So those are things that you need to check in with yourself. And many of us don't. And then we think that like this, like, scripting method we saw on TikTok will allow us to like have like a relationship or money or career. And I'm like, it's not that simple. And so that's like a huge misconception I'm trying to break about manifesting, that it is so based in energy, and it is so much proven in science that like the more you understand it from a natural phenomenon, the more it'll make sense to you, that you internally have to shift some belief systems to attract what you want in your life.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And I think that even, when it comes to manifesting, like, for example, there have been a couple times in my life where I tried to actually manifest something and I wanted it so bad. And I thought I wanted it right at the moment. And then when it didn't happen, I was like, oh, this doesn't work. I don't like, I completely kind of, got, disappointed at this. And then next thing you know, I am, other opportunities are coming my way. And I'm like, I remember having coffee one day and I sat down and I was like, if I actually had manifested this other thing that I wanted, which I learned that I don't even want anymore, like I wouldn't have gotten this. So I feel like we could get in the way, of our own, like, I guess, opportunities, just by trying to either force things or not understanding exactly, or not tuning into the right mindset, I guess. Now, can you give us a few examples of what having a scarcity mindset looks like, and how can we change it?
Yeah, I'm also really glad that you did mention your last point, because that's huge too. Like, to
Mm-hmm.
anyone listening to this, like, sometimes manifestations don't fall into fruition that you want because your ego thinks you want it, like your mind that's based in fear. Whereas, like, on a deeper, like, spiritual soul level,
Yeah.
there is something else out there that's better for you, that will serve you better, and you will only see that like later in
Mm-hmm.
retrospect, in hindsight.
Yeah.
So to answer your question on scarcity mindset, um, almost like this almost goes along with this misconception about manifestation, because scarcity mindset is kind of like almost speaking from a place of lack. So, for example, for example, I'll use my own situation. So me back in March, where I was like, okay, I need to either go down this 9 to 5 path, or I need to start my own business. Like, I can't do both. Saying things like I can't, or I need to pick one, or, oh, I can't afford that, or, oh, like, I'm just not good enough. Like, these are things that they imply lack. They imply you not having them. So a way to reframe those things would be like, show me different ways where I can afford this one thing, where I don't have to pick and choose. Or, okay, if I want a job and I want to start a business, let me do both. Universe, show me how to make the time to prioritize and balance both. Because I have friends who are kicking like ass, would literally work in the 9 to 5s, and then they're having a podcast on the side, they're doing a business on the side, they're running a brand, and they're doing both of the things. So you don't have to pick one. And I think
Yeah.
that was like a scarcity mindset that I had, where I was like, it needs to be one or the other, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
Or things like, I am successful enough to accomplish X goal, so let me work consistently to that every day. So it's coming from a place of abundance rather than a place of lack, and rather than coming from, a place of using words like I can't, or I should, or I need to. It's coming from a place of I choose to, I will make time for, I have the space for. So that's kind of the difference there.
I love it. Now, what are a few steps we can take to identify and erase those negative thoughts when they come? How can we identify and kind of, build this safety net? Then when we realize we're experiencing these negative thoughts, we're like, okay, quick, I'm going to catch it and then do something about it.
Yeah, so I actually learned this from my good friend, Megan Elise. If people are interested in seeing her on Instagram, she's actually a RTT hypnotherapist, rapid transformational therapist. And she always talks about how when you catch yourself doing a negative, like saying a negative thought, obviously it will take time. It will take a lot of like pausing and being like, because I'll still say it too. I'll say things like, oh, I should, or I can't do that. And then it's taken time for me to pick up that should and can't are words that I want to try and really erase from my vocabulary. So when I pick up on that, Megan actually taught me, like in my podcast, actually, that if you like snap or clap or you do some sort of motion with your body, when you identify that and then reframe it to I choose to, or I have time to, or I make space for, your body will start to associate that movement with that reframe, which really helps. And then just being able to like say that new statement. So like, I choose to make time to work out and meditate today. So saying that thing, maybe I would recommend vocalizing it out loud a few times. I would recommend writing it down a few times. If you want to say it to yourself in the mirror when you do catch this, or however, whatever feels the most natural to you and not like too like rehearsed. It might feel weird originally when you start, but now what I do is like, I'll just kind of say it out loud. It just feels natural for me to like keep repeating this thing out loud. Or sometimes when I get frustrated that, I'm still, because I had plans to travel this year. So sometimes when I get frustrated that I'm still like at home and like I'm seeing other people traveling, and I'm, in a place where right now, obviously so freaking thankful that like I'm living with my parents and they're supporting for me. But obviously at times it can get a little bit frustrating just because you're in an environment all the time. So instead of saying things like, oh my gosh, like I need to get out, I kept saying that a lot. Now it's kind of like, I'm so grateful that I live in my hometown because it provides me with the opportunity to eventually venture out and have more adventure and build my financial freedom and travel. So I've been saying that every morning now, where instead of I need to get out, it's like, I'm so grateful that this will allow me to then explore. So, a lot of catching on to what goes on in your head is just like that self-awareness and that ability to shut out the noise and be like, oh, these are actually my thoughts. And things that help with that are meditation, yoga, taking walks, journaling, etc. So
Yeah, awesome. I like that. You also talked about conscious productivity. What does that mean?
yeah, so I remember making this post a few weeks ago because I was falling under this, like, I would say, rabbit hole of like constantly making content or feeling like I need to have, X amount of meetings in a week or X amount of clients or working with so many hours or having a podcast out all the time. And I was in a place of go, go, go so much where I felt very robotic. Like I felt like I was on autopilot and I was just producing things because I had to produce them. And I was like, wait, this goes against my entire mindset and my entire philosophy, which is like, you should make things and produce things because you enjoy doing it and it's fulfilling. And obviously I understand that that's a privilege to be able to say that because there are, if financial security is a priority for you, then you're going to have to put yourself in positions where maybe you're having a horrible day and you still have to show up because you have to make money. And I have so much respect for that. Fortunately, again, for me, this goes back to the whole idea that like I can be at home because I have my parents' full support. But for me, I still noticed myself running on autopilot and producing content just because I felt like I was like under these like mental deadlines I was making in my head. And I was like, this isn't authentic to me or my brand or what I talk about. So I made this post where I was like, how about we come from a place of like, if I don't want to do a podcast this week because I don't have the energy to actually have a conversation, then I don't have to. I'd rather do a conversation. You and I had this conversation the other day where like, well, backstory for everyone, like I showed up to do our podcast on Thursday being like, I have this podcast penciled in 11 a.m. with Gabby. We have to do this. We have to do this. Like had an argument with my parents, like not a big deal at all, but I was just in such like a bad mental state. And then I still showed up and you were like, are you good? Like, I was like,
no, yeah, exactly. Because you want to, I feel like I'm a true believer in energy in the sense that if you're feeling something, go for it. But if you're not, don't do that to yourself. You're not even to me or other people. Don't do that to yourself. Right. That's what I experienced.
So true.
Yeah. So what do you do for fun? Like when you're feeling stressed and you're like, all right, I can't do this, I'm not feeling it. I don't want to do a podcast. I'm tired, because it happens. What do you do for fun or to kind of decompress?
Yeah. So for me, I love, like, as I said, like taking walks or like hanging out with friends. Like all my friends know this, but I love like exploring new coffee shops and like cute town places and like walking outside and taking pictures. Unfortunately now it's colder, so I can't do that. But like when I'm at home, I love like doing like dance workouts or like learning new dance routines or choreography. Like that's my kind of stress-free like outlet that I do every night. I'll do my dance and I'll do my yoga. I have like a lot of like journals and books. I love like reading and writing. I always have since I was a child. So I actually like sometimes when I'm stressed, I'll write like poetry. I love poetry and words and kind of like expressing emotions through words. And I actually have a poetry Instagram where I just like will write stuff and I'll just post it. So, I've actually decided like this year, like why not just collect it into an anthology and just post it like as a book. So that's like a fun project I'm working on that feels less career oriented and more just like for myself. So
kind of like, exploring your creativity, which is also good. It's
so important. So undermined and under talked about. Yeah.
So what does a day in the life of a mindset coach look like for you?
Yeah, this is really funny because I made a video exactly like call it a day in the life of a mindset coach, just like a fun one on TikTok. But it's different every day. Like I think all entrepreneurs or coaches or whatever can vouch for this. Like every day you wake up and you will have meetings at different times. You will have clients at different times. You'll have people who cancel and you need to, kind of be prepared for that. Kind of like what you had to do last week with me when I had to like reschedule. I'm sure you can relate as well. But like this morning I woke up early because I had a call earlier in the day and then she just didn't show up. And it was one of those things where I was like, all right, like, let me just figure out how to still be positive about this because originally I would get so like, oh my God, like how could that person do that? But it's like, I've done it. Like we all have done it. And it's a matter of like, I started reframing my mindset. Instead of being annoyed, I was like, well, this got me to wake up earlier. It got me to start my day earlier. I went and I got myself a coffee. I was like, it's going to be a good day. So, things are different. Some days I really like focusing on the creativity part. So it'll be more marketing, and I'll make like Instagram posts and Instagram, like I'll post something and make a long caption, or some days will be a little bit more technical where like I'm like, you know what, I'm going to spend hours like editing this podcast and making it look good and putting it out there. So it really varies. Some days I'll have a ton of clients who booked in a day. Other days I won't. So I kind of, going back to that idea of like flowing with your energy, I like really showing up in a way where I'm doing things because I have like the full, energetic, like abundance, if you will,
Yeah.
to be able to do that.
Awesome. Are there any books that you recommend for people that want to start exploring their, negative beliefs and all of that, and they have, they are basically are at zero? Are there any books you recommend?
Yeah, so I talk about this all the time. I've even mentioned this book, I think earlier in this call. I don't know if I mentioned it. Actually, no, I didn't, but it's called Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. That book for me is like what got me first into my whole spiritual personal development journey. It's all about the power of the present moment, the power of observing your thoughts rather than attaching to them. So just kind of seeing your thoughts as like a river, if you will, like flowing down a river rather than something that defines who you are. And it's helped a lot of people who, might be like at kind of like you said, like really early in their journey where they don't really have too much of an understanding of these concepts. So yeah.
Awesome. I'm gonna read it because I never heard of that book,
Oh
but
my God, it's
it
such a
sounds
good read. And
amazing.
there's like points to pause and like reevaluate and kind of think about what the author is saying, which I think is really, really helpful. And I appreciate how he writes it. It's very like readable, I would say. It's not dense.
Cool. I like that. So through coaching, what are a few things that you have learned from guiding or teaching other people?
Yeah, a huge thing for me that I'm still working on that I always have to be mindful of is like fully and consciously listening to the other person. I love talking, as people might have been able to tell from this conversation. I can talk a lot. And so the huge thing about being a coach is like you're not supposed to be the one talking. You're supposed to let your clients be the one have their own revelations, and you're supposed to be the guiding voice. So that's a huge thing I've learned where I'm like, I need to just shut up and listen at times. And that's like still difficult for me. And then also the fact that like, this is a huge one for all coaches. And I think people in general, both skills are, aside from the conscious listening, it's like not also coming to a conversation with your own assumptions and your own worldview. It's not making any sort of assumptions on where the other person could be coming from in regards to their own decisions that they're making in life, in regards to their goals and what they want to achieve. Like you have to completely try and come from a non-biased perspective, which is, it's difficult. It's not 100% possible to do that, but that is like the biggest challenge, coming from a place of zero bias and zero judgment.
Yeah,
So
so important. All right, I have two more questions for you. What is next for you? What do you want to be doing next year? We're
uh,
all going to start clean 2021 after a rough year.
yeah,
What plans do you have?
hoping that the year is better for sure. Next year I'm just hoping to finally come out with the book that I was talking about. I was hoping to come out with it this year, but like I said, because I didn't want it being such a career-oriented project, I was like, I'm just going to flow with it. I'm going to write when I feel called to write and not make it a thing that I have to do every day. And that's why it's taken me longer. And I would rather have it take longer than try and put it out sooner. So stay tuned for the book. It'll just be a collection of poems similar to like Rupi Kaur style, if people are familiar with that. She's definitely someone whose writing I love. And then hoping to come out with a course in the next few months. It's similar to the webinar I spoke about earlier, the Connect with Your Purpose and Strengths webinar. I'm actually making that into a course. So if anyone is interested, I will have pre-sales opening up soon. And that's something that I hope to do. And maybe some group coaching sessions. Right now it's been one-on-one, but maybe having like a webinar where it can be, 6 or 7 people and we can have those group sessions. I think those are all definitely things to start thinking about. And hopefully once COVID ends, I can actually, with JCK, the foundation, the mental health one, go into the schools publicly and start helping students and really transforming like their worldviews and their, I would want to say, self-confidence and their self-image. That's huge to me. So
Awesome. I love that. I can't wait to see what you do next. All right, my last question. What are a few steps we can take to kind of stop sabotaging our dreams?
I love that you like say that question for last because it's a heavy one. There's so many different steps you can take. I always say like there's so much I just think there's so much pressure with this idea of like follow your dreams and pursue your purpose, because for people who are already maybe committed to something right now that they don't fully entirely want to be doing and they're aware of that, I would just say pick one small thing that you see your dream self doing. Like you in 5 years or you in 10 years, what does that look like? How would you dress? How would you express yourself? What would a day-to-day routine look like for you? Get really clear on that and then pick one of those things and start doing that today. It can be such a small thing. Like let's say future you wakes up at 7 a.m. and goes on jogs as the sun rises. Well, maybe implement that into your schedule if you have time. Like let's say you are working 8 hours a day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Then maybe like, can you start doing that now? Can you wake up at sunrise and do the morning yoga? Or future you maybe, is a full-time entrepreneur and right now you're not that. So what can you do on the side after your day job? Are you able to maybe start like a small brand on the side or start a podcast or a YouTube channel? I have a friend who recently started doing a lot of those things, and like that kind of sends out the vibration that you're working towards that goal. It can be as small as like making TikTok videos, just like a couple times a week. So find one feasible thing. And I would say the world's your oyster nowadays with the digital age. There are so many opportunities that like you can find your way to do anything and without investing any money, like totally for free. You have the ability to make a podcast or a YouTube channel or TikTok videos. And I think if you have the belief in yourself that you will succeed, then like those opportunities will come in with the consistency and with the drive. And there's no such thing as failure in my mind. The way that I view failure is quitting. If you quit, then that's failure to me. But everything else, the way I see it, is either roadblocks or just redirection. So
yeah, I love that. Oh my goodness. I might actually attend one of your workshops. I'll be looking out for those.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Instagram Live. I will really do some more next year, and then LinkedIn, I'll definitely be posting about it there as well if anyone's interested. So
yes, awesome. Thank you so much for doing this interview. I had so much fun, and I feel like I could take you out for coffee and keep talking about this.
We need to. Oh my gosh. Yeah. If I ever you're always welcome in DC. So.
I have actually never been to DC, so if I ever go, I'll definitely, hit you up and meet up.
Yeah, I'm excited. It'll be fun. We can go switch up.
Thank you for listening to this episode. You liked what you heard? Tell me what you liked in the review section, and if you want more episodes like this, please share your suggestions. After this episode, the conversation continues in our new Facebook group. The question for today is, do you think internships in the tech world should be paid? Let me know by joining us at the Invernadero Mind Facebook group and share your thoughts. I can't wait to see you there.